Today, we'll explore the factors driving these fears, examine historical parallels, and weigh expert opinions to answer the critical question: could World War III happen in 2025? To understand why fears of a global conflict have intensified, we must first look at the current geopolitical landscape. By 2025, several flashpoints could push the world closer to the brink of war. In Eastern Europe, the war in Ukraine shows no signs of abating. Russia's continued aggression and Western support for Kyiv have created a dangerous standoff between Moscow and NATO. Any direct involvement by NATO forces, or even an accidental clash, could escalate into a broader conflict involving nuclear-armed powers. Meanwhile, tensions in the Indo-Pacific region are reaching new heights. China's growing assertiveness toward Taiwan remains one of the most volatile issues. Analysts warn that Beijing may feel emboldened to take decisive action by 2025, especially if domestic pressures mount or if it perceives a window of opportunity before the U.S. presidential election cycle intensifies. Such a move would almost certainly draw Washington into the fray, alongside allies like Japan and South Korea. Elsewhere, simmering disputes in the Middle East, between Israel and Iran, or among Gulf states, add another layer of complexity. Proxy wars, cyber attacks, and missile strikes risk escalating into full-blown regional wars, which could then pull in global players. These interconnected crises create what many experts describe as a perfect storm of conditions, ripe for miscalculation, miscommunication, or outright provocation. History offers sobering lessons about how seemingly isolated incidents can ignite global conflagrations. Consider the lead-up to World War I. A web of alliances, nationalism, and militarism turned the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand into a continent-wide bloodbath. Similarly, the expansionist policies of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan set the stage for World War II, a reminder that unchecked aggression often invites retaliation. During the Cold War, proxy conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan kept the world teetering on the brink of nuclear annihilation. Yet, despite close calls like the Cuban Missile Crisis, mutually assured destruction, MAD, ultimately deterred direct conflict between the US and the Soviet Union. But here's the catch. Today's world is vastly different. The bipolar order of the Cold War has given way to a multipolar system, with multiple actors vying for influence. Unlike during the Cold War, there is no single doctrine of deterrence governing all nations. Instead, we face a fragmented and unpredictable international arena, where smaller provocations can snowball into catastrophic outcomes. One of the most significant differences between past eras and today is technology. Modern warfare is no longer confined to tanks, planes, and ships. Cyber attacks, artificial intelligence, and autonomous weapon systems have introduced entirely new dimensions of conflict. For instance, cyber warfare has already proven its destructive potential. In recent years, ransomware attacks and state-sponsored hacking campaigns have disrupted critical infrastructure worldwide. Imagine similar attacks targeting power grids, financial systems, or communication networks on a global scale. Such disruptions could cripple entire economies and provoke retaliatory strikes. Artificial intelligence adds another layer of complexity. Autonomous drones and decision-making algorithms may reduce human error, but they also increase the risk of unintended escalation. What happens if an AI system misinterprets a signal or acts too quickly for humans to intervene? Moreover, space has become a contested domain. Satellites essential for navigation, surveillance, and communication are increasingly vulnerable to anti-satellite weapons. A conflict in orbit could render vast swaths of Earth-dependent infrastructure useless, plunging the planet into chaos. These technologies make warfare faster, more precise, and potentially more devastating. They also blur the lines between peace and war, making it harder to define when a conflict truly begins. While geopolitics and technology dominate discussions of war, economic and social factors play equally crucial roles. Rising inflation, supply chain disruptions, and energy crises have left many nations struggling to maintain stability. Desperate governments may resort to aggressive foreign policies to distract from domestic woes, a tactic known as wag the dog. Climate change further exacerbates these pressures. Droughts, floods, and extreme weather events displace millions, straining resources and fueling competition over arable land and water. Regions like Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia are particularly vulnerable, creating fertile ground for insurgencies and proxy wars. Social unrest compounds the problem. Populist movements, misinformation campaigns, and declining trust in institutions undermine cooperation within and between nations. When societies fracture internally, their ability to engage in constructive diplomacy diminishes, increasing the likelihood of external conflict. So, what do the experts say? Dr. Emily Carter, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, warns that while a full-scale World War III remains unlikely, the probability is higher now than at any point since the Cold War. She points to the erosion of arms control agreements, such as the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, as a key concern. Retired General Mark Thompson echoes this sentiment, emphasizing the role of miscalculation. In a multipolar world, he says, even minor misunderstandings can escalate rapidly. Add in advanced weaponry and cyber capabilities, and you've got a recipe for disaster. On the other hand, some scholars argue that globalization acts as a stabilizing force. Professor Alan Roberts of Georgetown University notes that interconnected economies create disincentives for large-scale conflict. No one wants to destroy markets they depend on, he explains. Still, others highlight the importance of leadership. Diplomatic failures, reckless rhetoric, or authoritarian impulses can tip the scales toward war. As historian Sarah Lynn observes, wars don't just happen. They're made by decisions, big and small. The specter of World War III is undeniably frightening, but it is not inevitable. History shows us that humanity has faced existential threats before and found ways to step back from the abyss. Prevention starts with diplomacy. Strengthening multilateral institutions like the United Nations, reviving arms control agreements, and fostering dialogue between adversaries can help de-escalate tensions. Civil society also plays a vital role. Grassroots movements advocating for peace, environmental sustainability, and economic justice remind us of our shared humanity. Ultimately, whether 2025 becomes a year of conflict or cooperation depends on choices made by leaders and by ordinary citizens around the world. Will we prioritize division or unity? Fear or hope? Destruction or creation? As we stand on the precipice of an uncertain future, let us remember the words of Albert Einstein. Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Let us choose understanding for ourselves, for our children, and for generations yet to come.